The 39th Army was a field army of the Soviet Union's Red Army formed on 15 November 1941 in the Arkhangelsk Military District, in accordance with a directive issued by the Stavka.On on 2 November 1941. The army was directly subordinate to the Stavka. On 1 December 1941 the army was listed by the Soviet General Staff's official order of battle listings as including 7 rifle divisions and 2 cavalry divisions, 355th, 357th, 361st, 369th, 373rd, 377th and 381st Rifle Divisions, plus 76th and 94th Cavalry Divisions. Kalinin Offensive. On 1 December 1941 the army was tasked to build defense lines along the eastern bank of the river Sheksna. After regrouping in the area of Torzhok it was sent to the Kalinin front on the 22nd of December, where the 39th Army took part in the Kalinin offensive operation. The Kalinin offensive operation had begun on 5 December 1941 and was one part of the Moscow strategic counteroffensive. The army was within the joint sector of the 22nd Army and 29th Army under the command of Lieutenant General Ivan Maslenikov. At the end of December the 39th Army broke through the enemy defenses to a significant depth. During the battles of 2–7 January 1942 the troops on the right wing reached the Volga River and those in the center broke through a new line of defense organized by the enemy on the right bank of the Volga, covering Rzhev from the west and southwest. By the end of the operation on 8 January 1942 the 39th Army had reached the northwest of Rzhev. The Sikersk-Vyazma offensive operation began immediately and the 39th Army broke through the enemy defenses in a narrow sector, expanding its offensive on Sychuka and providing a corridor through the enemy front for the 29th Army and 11th Cavalry Corps. By the end of January 1942 its troops came to the Vyazma-Smolensk Railway on the north of Yartsevo where they met stubborn resistance of the enemy troops. In early February the enemy counterattacks from Rzhev and Olenino stopped the advance of Soviet troops and the Russian troops on the Kalinin front were forced into a defensive situation. This resulted in the Komzherkovsky Ledge being connected to the Kalinin front by a narrow corridor between Nelidovo and Bely, where the 39th Army faced the threatening situation of having the lines of communication cut by the enemy. The 2nd Shock Army at the Volkhov front was in a similar situation in the same time. Kalinin defense. From February to June 1942 the 39th Army was fighting in the northwest of Vyazma-Komzherkovsky in a defensive role. Here the 39th Army engaged in the defense of a salient which contained an enormous enemy force, caused by the 9th Army who were involved in Operation Sadliance. The German operation began on the 2nd of July against the troops of 39th Army and 11th Cavalry Corps, which occupied the Komzherkovsky Ledge. The Germans attacked at the narrowest part of the corridor, approximately 27 to 28 kilometers, attacking in the direction of Bely and Olenino. By the 6th of July, the German troops had closed the corridor and the 39th Army and 11th Cavalry Corps were in encirclement and then dissected into 2 groups. By the 8th of July, the 11th Cavalry Corps were subordinated to the 39th Army. The German army ceased Operation Sadlitz when it officially ended on July 12 after reporting by radio from the Führer's headquarters. The victory in the summer battle of Rzhev Evacuation and disbandment. On the 17th of July, around 8,000 troops of the 39th Army, under the command by Maslenikov, crossed the river Obshu to land on the north bank and occupied the area north of the village Shizdarevo. On the 18th of July, by order of the Kalinin Front commander, the Military Council of 39th Army with a group of staff officers and the wounded were evacuated in 9 Po-2 light aircraft in Andreapol, of which 3 planes crashed. Surrounded parts of the 39th Army had been ordered to obey the deputy of Maslenikov, Lieutenant General Bogdanov, and the deputy of the political commissar of 39th Army, Division Commissar Shabolin. Battles continued for 3 weeks while the Germans tried to destroy the encircled groups of the 39th Army. In late July 1942 the individual units were released from the front and, with no troops, the 39th Army was disbanded. Soviet invasion of Manchuria and after. On the 1st of May 1945, 39th Army was transferred to the reserve of the Supreme High Command. That day, 39th Army rifle units consisted of 5th Guards Rifle Corps, 94th Rifle Corps, and 113th Rifle Corps. Artillery forces included 139, 610, 555, and the 621st Anti-Aircraft Artillery Regiment. In May to June 1945, 39th Army was relocated to Mongolia, and on the 20th of June it was included in the Transbaikal Front under Marshal Rodion Malinovsky. It then took part in the Soviet invasion of Manchuria. In the Khingan-Mukden operations, Army troops attacked from Tamtsag-Buligskogo Protrusion Forces, Japanese 3rd Area Army, Kwantung Army, and the left flank of 4th Independent Army. After defeating the enemy, covering the approaches to the passes Greater Zingan, the army seized Halonashansky fortified area, developing the offensive in the Changchun, advanced forward for 350 to 400 kilometers, and taking Ulan-Hoto and Solon. By the 14th of August it had reached the central part of Manchuria, expanding the offensive to the south part of the army in conjunction with the 6th Guards Tank Army released on the 19th of August Mukden. The 20th of August Changchun entered Kvantan, and the 21st of August took Dalian, and on the 22nd of August Port Arthur on the Chinese coast. From 1945 to 55 the 39th Army was stationed at Port Arthur. In Port Arthur was a naval base, the commander of which was Vice Admiral Vasily A. Stepanovich. In 1948, the Shandong Peninsula, 200 kilometers from the far-acting U.S. military base. Every day there appeared a reconnaissance plane and at low altitude on the same route flew over and photographed the Soviet and Chinese sites, airfields. Soviet pilots stopped the flights. Americans sent a note to the Foreign Ministry in a statement about the attack on the Soviet fighters, of-course light passenger aircraft, but reconnaissance flights over Liaodong stopped. In June 1948, in Port Arthur, a major joint exercise of all arms was undertaken. Malinovsky managed the whole exercise. From Khabarovsk arrived Sakrasovsky, Far East Air Force Commander Bo. Exercise was held in 2 main stages. On the ground, a reflection of Marines' imaginary enemy. The second, an imitation of massed bombing. In Port Arthur was deployed the 113th Rifle Corps headquarters of Lieutenant General Tereshkova, 338th Infantry Division, the area of Port Arthur. Dalny, 358th from the far to the north boundary of the zone, 262 Rifle Division along the northern border of the peninsula. The headquarters of 5 artillery Artillery Corps, 150th Fortified Region, 139 APABR, 7th Regiment. Separate communication provided connection between parts on the Liaodong, as well as Moscow and Vladivostok. Artillery Regiment, 48th Guards. SME's Defense Regiment, IP, Balanatio. Editors Newspapers of the 39th Army, Son of the Motherland. After the war, she became known as the Glory of the Motherland. The editor, Lieutenant Colonel B.L. Krasovsky. Naval Base USSR. In the area of Jinzhou City headquarters stationed 5th Guards Rifle Corps LT, Gen. L. Alexeyeva, 1991, and 17th Guards Rifle Division under the command of Major General Eugene L. Korkutsa. Chief of Staff Lieutenant Strashnenko. The division includes the 21th Separate Battalion, on the basis of which the Chinese volunteers were trained. 26th Guards Cannon Artillery Regiment, the 46th Regiment of Guards Mortar, part of the 6th Division Artillery Breakthrough Torpedo Regiment Pacific Fleet. At Darlyhem was based the 33rd Gun Division Headquarters 7th BAC Air Units. The 14th Zenat 119th Infantry Regiment guarded the port, plus elements of the Soviet Navy. To address the issue of troop withdrawal in 1954 in Port Arthur, Nikita Khrushchev arrived. He gave the military 5 months for withdrawal. The 2nd of October 1954 a communiqué was signed on redeployment of the 39th Army and Navy units. By that time, the Soviet Union had in China 6 rifle and 1 mechanized division, a division patrol boats, crew submarines, torpedo boats brigade, the Brigade of Water Region, Coastal Defense Forces and Air Defense, Naval Bombers and Fighter Air Division Air Corps. On the 31st of May 1955 and the deployment of troops over capital facilities and most of the equipment transferred to China. Almost everything was free of charge, including dozens of torpedo boats, tanks, submarines, all the ammunition. On the day of departure of troops, solemn construction in parts where the Chinese gave the keys to the property. To the sound of the Soviet anthem was lowered naval flag of the Soviet Union, and then was replaced by a Chinese flag. Conclusion took 8 months. After retiring in Port Arthur for a while, there were still Soviet specialists who taught Chinese sailors. Reduction and then disbanding the 39th Army began in 1955. The Army was disbanded in 1956 as part of Maritime Military District. After the war, the Army was stationed for many years in Mongolia, with its headquarters at Ulaanbaatar. Soviet perceptions of threat from China increased in the 1960s. A number of measures were taken to increase troop strength in the Transbaikal and in Mongolia. For the Baltic to the far east came the 21st Guards Tank Division of the Leningrad Military District in the Zabvo 2nd Guards Tank Division. It also deployed 5th Guards Tank Division, 32nd, 66th, 49th, and 111th Tank Divisions. By the early 1970s, the 39th Combined Arms Army had been strengthened in the Transbaikal, while in Mongolia there was formed a progressive group from the 39th Army. The 51st Tank Division arrived in Mongolia in 1974, transferred from the North Caucasus Military District. In the late 1980s, the Army consisted of the 2nd Guards Tank Division, 51st Tank Division, and 12th, 41st, and 91st Motor Rifle Divisions. The withdrawal of troops from Mongolia took 28 months. On 4 February 1989, a Sino-Soviet agreement was signed to reduce troops on the border. 15 May 1989, and the Soviet government announced a partial, then the complete withdrawal of 39th Army of the Arkhangelsk Military District from Mongolia. The army consisted of more than 50,000 soldiers, 1816 tanks, 2,531 armored vehicles, 1461 artillery systems, 190 aircraft and 130 helicopters. On 25 September 1992, the completion of the withdrawal was officially announced. The last Russian troops left Mongolia in December 1992. Commanding officers: Major General Ivan Alexandrovich Bogdanov, Lieutenant General Ivan Ivanovich Maslenikov.